History is not always written by the victors. Sometimes it is written by the bewildered. We tend to look back at the Middle Ages with absolute certainty. A world defined by primitive kings, stone castles, and documented wars. But beneath the surface of the medieval chroniclers lies a dark and tamed fringe. A shadowland where reality suddenly fractured, leaving behind anomalies that science cannot dissect. Turn the clock back nearly 9 centuries. The place is the isolated village of Woolpit, nestled deep within a heavy, mist-shrouded forests of Suffolk, England. The year is shrouded in a brutal civil war, an era known simply as the Anarchy, a time when the earth itself seemed scarred. The villagers of Woolpit lived a predictable, God-fearing life. They cleared the trees, harvested the fields, and dug deep pits to trap the wolves that descended from the dark woods at night. Life was bounded by the church bells. But on an ordinary harvest day, something shifted in the atmosphere. The heavy silence of the countryside was shattered, not by an invading army and not by the howl of beasts. It began with a sound that defies explanation. A rhythmic metallic chiming echoing from the earth. The villagers approached the freshly dug trenches. The boundary between our world and the unknown collapsed entirely. What crawled out of those pits would challenge the very fabric of human history. Two souls that did not belong to this earth. Two children who would ignite a mystery that has refused to die for 900 years. This is not a fairy tale. This is a documented terror. It was the height of the harvest season. The sun offered little warmth to the laborers working the fields of Woolpit. Suddenly, the rhythmic clanging ceased. A suffocating, unnatural silence took over. From the shadows of the deep wolf pits, something was moving. The harvesters dropped their sickles. Out of the darkness of the earth, two small figures crawled into the dim daylight. They were a boy and a girl, holding on to each other. They were trembling from a sheer, unadulterated terror. They looked human, yet entirely alien to this world. Their clothes were the first anomaly. They were not woven from coarse wool or rough linen of English peasants. Instead, they wore garments made of strange, unfamiliar textures. But it was not their attire that terrified the villagers. The skin of both children glowed with a distinct, unnatural green hue. It was not a superficial stain of moss or leaves. Their very lifeblood seemed entirely different. They shielded their eyes from the pale daylight. They began to speak, weeping in desperation. But the sounds were not English, French, or Latin. It was a rapid, melodic, and harshly unfamiliar dialect. A language born in complete isolation from mankind. The harvest field became a theater of absolute disbelief. Word of the green intruders spread through the thatched huts of Woolpit like wildfire. Peasants, blacksmiths, and church elders gathered at the edge of the pit, forming a cautious, fearful circle around the two weeping children. In the 12th century, anything that fell outside the rigid boundaries of scripture was considered either demonic or an omen of an impending apocalypse. Yet despite the overwhelming fear, humanity prevailed over superstition. The children were not slaughtered in the fields. Instead, they were gathered up, their small green hands called to the touch, and marched into the heart of the village. They were brought before the ultimate local authority, Sir Richard the Khan, a wealthy and educated local knight who owned a secure estate nearby. Sir Richard's manor was a place of relative enlightenment compared to the dirt floor huts of the serfs. He looked at the children not with religious fury, but with deep, scholarly fascination. Inside the stone walls of the manor, the true tragedy of the children began to unfold. They were safe from the elements, but they were trapped in a profound psychological prison. They could not communicate. Every question asked by Sir Richard or the local priests was met with a wall of unrecognized, desperate words. The children would look at the stone ceilings, the glass windows, and the heavy iron tools with an expression of pure alien wonder, as if they had never seen sword structures or manufactured metal in their entire lives. But a more immediate, life-threatening crisis was brewing. The children were starving. Sir Richard ordered his servants to bring out the finest foods of the estate: freshly baked wheat bread, roasted meats, sweet fruits, and thick stouts. But as the platters were placed before them, the children drew back in disgust. They wept, pushing the food away, their bodies physically rejecting the aroma of medieval human sustenance. Days bled into weeks, and the children grew weaker. Their emerald skin began to lose its luster, turning a pale, sickly shade of grey. They were fading away, starving to death in the middle of a land of plenty, completely unable to communicate what their bodies desperately needed to survive. Woolpit was about to witness either a slow, tragic death or a bizarre breakthrough that would unlock the first layer of this historical enigma. The children were on the very brink of death. Their eyes were sunken, their strength entirely depleted. They lay on the cold stone floors of Sir Richard's manor, refusing everything that the human world deemed nourishing. It seemed that this bizarre historical anomaly would end in a silent, tragic double burial. Then the atmospheric tension broke. Through the heavy oak doors of the kitchen, a servant entered, carrying a fresh harvest from the fields. It was not bread or meat, but a bundle of green beans still attached to their long, coarse stalks. The reaction was instantaneous. The two children, who had spent days in a state of near catatonic starvation, suddenly sat up. Their eyes widened with a frantic, animalistic hunger. They did not just beg for the food, they charged at the servant, weeping with a desperate joy, their eyes fixed solely on the green pods. But when the peasants handed them the beans, another strange behavior manifested. The children did not open the pods to eat the seeds within. Instead, they began frantically ripping at the stalks, searching the exterior of the plant in complete confusion, weeping bitterly when they found nothing on the outside. It was only when a nearby villager took a pod, cracked it open, and showed them the hidden green beans inside that the children understood. They grabbed the raw seeds, devouring them with a manic intensity. For months, this was the only substance that passed through their lips. Raw green beans. Anything else was poison to their systems. With this singular form of nourishment, a terrifying biological transformation began. As the weeks bled into months, the boy, who had arrived weaker and more traumatized than his sister, began to wither. Despite eating the beans, his body rejected the harsh atmospheric pressure, the heavy gravity, and the burning daylight of our world. He sank into the deep fever and quietly slipped away into the night, leaving his sister entirely alone in an alien universe. But the girl survived. And as she slowly began to tolerate other human foods, the most shocking visual transformation took place. The emerald tint that had defined her flesh began to fade. Day by day, the unnatural green pigment washed away, revealing a pale, ordinary Anglo-Saxon skin tone beneath. She was shedding her origins, adapting biologically to the earth, losing the very trait that made her an anomaly. She was becoming one of us. But the secrets locked inside her mind were about to be unleashed as she finally learned to speak our language. The green pigment had completely vanished from her skin, and with it, the raw, unpolished nature of her past. The girl had been baptized into the Christian faith, integrated into the household of Sir Richard the Khan, and grew into a young woman. But the transformation wasn't merely physical. Over years of grueling isolation, she had finally mastered the complex vowels and syntax of the English language. The elders of Woolpit and the scholars of Suffolk finally had their key. The living anomaly could now speak. They gathered around her in the quiet halls of the manor, expecting a simple explanation, perhaps a tale of lost journey, a kidnapping, or a wandering path from a distant country. Instead, the words that left her lips plunged the room into a deep, chilling silence. She told them she did not know the name of her people, nor did she know how she had arrived in England. But she remembered her home with terrifying clarity. She called it St. Martin's Land, a realm named after the saint they venerated. But it was not an England they recognized. In St. Martin's Land, she explained, the sun never rises. There are no bright mornings, no scorching noons, and no golden sunsets. The sky above her home was a perpetual twilight, a heavy, eternal gray-green dusk that hung over a world where everything was permanently cast in shadows. She whispered,
"The light there is like the light you see here just after the sun has set, or just before it rises."
She claimed that her entire country was entirely green, just as she and her brother had been, and that great, wide river separated their kingdom from a much brighter, distant land that they could see across the water, a land that glowed with a brilliant radiance they could never reach. When asked what she and her brother were doing before they fell into our reality, her story became even more surreal. She remembered tending to her father's cattle in the twilight pastures. They were following the herd deep into a massive, cavernous tunnel. As they ventured further into the subterranean dark, a sudden, overwhelming sound echoed around them. A deep, rhythmic clanging of the bells, incredibly loud and melodic. Mesmerized by the sound, the children wandered deeper into the cavern, completely losing their bearings. They walked through the dark for what felt like an eternity, chasing the sound of the metallic chimes. Then, without warning, The tunnel ended. They stepped out of the blackness of the earth, blinded by an exploding, agonizing white light, the pale midday harvest sun of Woolpit. They tried to run back into the darkness, but the light was too intense, the air too heavy, and the opening of the cave had seemingly vanished behind them. They were trapped in a world of blinding sun, red-blooded humans, and solid stone. The confession was made. It was not the story of a lost peasant. It was a terrifying narrative that shattered the medieval understanding of the cosmos. 9 centuries of silence, yet the mystery remains. Who were these children? Modern investigators have stripped away the folklore to leave behind 3 brutal theories. The historical tragedy. Historians believe the children were Flemish immigrants fleeing persecution. After their parents were slaughtered in a nearby battle, the traumatized children fled into the ancient flint mines of Suffolk, suffering from severe malnutrition. They developed chlorosis, the green sickness, which vanished once their diet changed. Their alien tongue was simply regional Flemish.
Ihr sollt alle da Seehand sterben. Nu lat uns garen, Würbart.
The subterranean hypotheses. For believers in the bizarre, St. Martin's Land was literal. They argue the children emerged from the hollow earth, a massive, sunless ecosystem existing deep beneath the crust, accessible only through ancient, forgotten cavern networks. The extraterrestrial threshold. The most extreme theory points to an accidental teleportation or a localized slip in space-time. A parallel universe or an alien world where the biology of its inhabitants is fundamentally adapted to a twilight environment and copper-based blood. 3 answers. One grounded in human tragedy, the others in cosmic horror. Which one did the world choose to believe? The Green Girls of Woolpit eventually lived out her days in the ordinary world. She married a man from King's Lynn, became a part of the local tapestry, and her extraordinary origins faded into old church records. But her story never truly died. Today, if you visit the village of Woolpit, you will find the sign of the village displaying the 2 green children standing together under a tree. A permanent reminder that our reality once fractured right beneath their feet. Were they just tragic, starving orphans of war lost in a dark mine? Or did they truly step through a cosmic tear from an eternal twilight world that exists parallel to our own? We may never know the truth. The wolf pits have long been filled, the ancient tunnels are caved in, and the sky remains stubbornly silent. But next time you walk past a dark cave or hear the strange metallic chiming of bells echoing in the quiet of the night, remember the children of Woolpit, and remember that sometimes the shadows look back. Reality has built-in errors.